The fight against fraud and corruption now, and the wheels of justice are turning slowly regarding the Steinhoff saga. The Reserve Bank has moved to attach the assets of former CEO Marcus Joost. He's been implicated in accounting fraud at the company, totaling over 200 billion rand.
The morning of Wednesday, December 6th, 2017, began like any other for most people. But for anyone with money tied up in Steinhoff International, it would become a day they'd never forget. That morning, Steinhoff's share price didn't just fall, it plunged into a terrifying freefall. Within days, the company that had been worth many billions, a favorite of investors, saw over 200 billion rands, more than $13 billion of its value, simply vanish. But this wasn't triggered by a stock market crash, a political scandal, or a global crisis. Not at all. At the center of it all was one man, Marcus Joost. The charismatic CEO who had built Steinhoff into a global powerhouse was now revealed to be the mastermind behind South Africa's biggest corporate fraud that would shake the nation to its core. This is the unbelievable story of Marcus Joost and how he pulled off South Africa's biggest fraud. The story of Marcus Johannes Joost began not in the towering skyscrapers of international business, but in the more modest settings of South Africa. Born in the late 1960s, Marcus grew up in Pretoria. His father worked for the post office and had a deep passion for horse racing, but young Marcus was quite different. He was naturally good with numbers. When he finished his regular schooling, he went to Stellenbosch University, which is a well-known and respected university. There, he studied hard to become a chartered accountant. This education taught him how money works. He learned all about a company's assets and its liabilities and how to calculate profits and losses. This was the special understanding of money that he would later use with terrible skill to deceive people. His early career path was fairly conventional for an aspiring accountant. He spent some time at the South African Revenue Service, learning the ins and outs of taxation from the government side. But the lure of the private sector, with its potential for greater wealth and influence, soon called to him. The real turning point in his early career came when he joined a company called Gamma Gamma. This wasn't a giant worldwide company. It was a business that made and sold furniture. By working with everyday household items, Marcus really started to sharpen his business skills and understanding. It was also around this time that he met someone who would be extremely important for his future success, a man named Klaus Daun. Klaus Daun was a smart German businessman who owned factories. He was very good at spotting good chances and making struggling businesses successful again. He noticed young Marcus Joost, who was full of ambition, and perhaps saw a bit of himself in Marcus, or recognized a natural talent he could help develop. Daun became like a teacher and guide for Marcus, and also a very important business partner. This partnership gave Marcus the big boost he needed. With Daun's support and connections, Joost began to search for bigger business deals and ways to create something truly significant. The late 1990s were a time of change and opportunity in South Africa as the country opened up to the world. Joost, energetic and with his financial knowledge and Daun's support, was perfectly positioned. The key move came in 1998. Bruno Steinhoff, another German businessman, had a successful furniture sourcing and sales company in Germany. Joost, representing South African manufacturing interests, largely connected to Daun, orchestrated a merger. These two complementary operations, South African manufacturing and German distribution, were brought together. This strategic marriage of companies formed the foundation of what would become Steinhoff International. It was a bold step, creating a company with an international footprint from the outset. And Marcus Joost, still relatively young but brimming with confidence and vision, was at the heart of it. His drive was undeniable. Just 2 years after this significant merger, in the year 2000, Marcus Joost was appointed Chief Executive Officer of Steinhoff International. The stage was now his, and he was ready to build an empire. With Marcus Joost now firmly in the driver's seat as CEO, Steinhoff International didn't just grow, it exploded. Joost wasn't a man to think small. He had a grand vision to build a global retail empire that would sell everything from sofas to sleepwear, making Steinhoff a household name across continents. Under his command, Steinhoff embarked on an astonishing shopping spree, buying up companies at a dizzying pace. The plan was simple: to take over markets around the world by buying one company after another. Steinhoff soon became known as Africa's IKEA because it was the main seller of low-cost furniture in Africa. But Marcus Jost wanted much more than just Africa. Europe became a major focus. One by one, many businesses like famous furniture stores in France, such as Conforama, and factories became part of the growing Steinhoff Group. This aggressive approach fueled incredible expansion. Next, Steinhoff made a big move into the difficult American market. In 2016, Steinhoff made headlines with its multi-billion-dollar acquisition of Mattress Firm. Mattress Firm was one of the biggest sellers of mattresses in America. This large purchase showed everyone that Steinhoff, with Jost in charge, was prepared to compete with the largest companies globally. Not content with just furniture and household goods, Jost also steered Steinhoff into other retail sectors. A particularly massive move was the acquisition of Pepcor in 2015, a vast clothing and general merchandise retailer with a strong presence in Africa, Australia, and Eastern Europe. This deal transformed Steinhoff overnight, adding thousands of stores and a huge new customer base. It was hailed as a masterstroke, diversifying the company and further cementing its status as a global retail powerhouse. As Steinhoff grew, so did its share price. On the Johannesburg Stock Exchange, the company became a star performer. Investors, both big institutions and ordinary people, flocked to buy Steinhoff shares, believing in Jost's vision and the company's seemingly unstoppable growth trajectory. For years, the company reported impressive profits and an ever-expanding footprint. It was seen as a South African champion, a company that had successfully taken on the world and won. And what of Marcus Jost himself during these boom years? He became more than just a CEO. He was a business icon, one of South Africa's wealthiest and most admired corporate leaders. He was the deal-maker extraordinaire, the man who could turn any business into gold. Few questioned his methods. The results, it seemed, spoke for themselves. Steinhoff was a giant, and Marcus Jost was the architect who had built it. While Steinhoff's star soared ever higher, painting a picture of brilliant success to the outside world, beneath the surface, things were not as straightforward as they seemed. The company Marcus Jost had built wasn't just big, it was incredibly complicated. Imagine a giant spider's web with threads spreading out in every direction, connecting countless smaller companies and businesses across dozens of countries. Steinhoff had become a dizzying maze of holding companies, subsidiaries, and joint ventures, all intricately linked. This complex structure made it very difficult for anyone on the outside, like investors or financial analysts, to get a truly clear view of what was happening deep inside the company's finances. It was like trying to see through a dense fog. You could see the outline of something huge, but the details were frustratingly hidden. For a long time, the sheer pace of growth and the impressive profits Steinhoff announced kept most serious questions at bay. When a company is making a lot of money, people tend to focus on the good news. However, the very complexity that characterized Steinhoff would later be seen as a deliberate design, a way to hide things that should have been out in the open. Some financial experts, looking at Steinhoff's accounts, would scratch their heads, finding them unusually opaque and hard to fully understand compared to other large companies. But these were often quiet concerns, drowned out by the loud applause for Steinhoff's latest big deal or record profit. Then, around 2015, the first public sign of trouble emerged. News began to filter out that authorities in Germany had started an investigation into Steinhoff's accounting practices. The German investigators were looking into whether the company had been inflating its income and the value of its assets through questionable deals, possibly with companies that were secretly connected to Steinhoff itself. These were serious allegations. Marcus Jost and Steinhoff immediately went on this defensive. They strongly denied any wrongdoing. They issued statements saying their accounts were all in order and that they were cooperating with the German authorities. To the public and to most investors, Jost remained the confident leader, assuring everyone that these investigations were just a misunderstanding, a minor hiccup that would soon be resolved. Many wanted to believe him. After all, Steinhoff was a global success story, and Jost was the visionary who had made it all happen. As 2017 began to draw to a close, the pressure that had been building beneath the surface at Steinhoff started to show serious cracks. For years, the company had successfully presented a picture of booming health. But now, its longtime auditors, Deloitte, were digging deeper than ever before as they prepared to review the company's annual financial statements. This wasn't just a routine check. Deloitte had questions, serious ones, about some of the company's complex dealings and how certain profits were being recorded. The auditors started to flag specific transactions that didn't quite make sense or seemed unusually structured. They wanted more information, more proof about deals that involved vast sums of money, sometimes with companies that were hard to trace or whose relationship with Steinhoff wasn't entirely clear. One area of concern reportedly involved how Steinhoff valued some of its European assets and certain high-value one-off transactions that boosted profits but lacked clear business substance. Marcus Joost, the charismatic leader who had always seemed to have all the answers, found himself in an increasingly tight spot. He and his team tried to provide explanations and reassure Deloitte that everything was in order. They likely argued that Steinhoff was a huge, complex global business and that its accounting reflected this. But the auditors weren't easily swayed this time. They needed concrete proof, independent verification that these questionable transactions were legitimate and accurately recorded. The clock was ticking. Steinhoff was due to release its annual financial results in early December. This was a critical moment for any publicly traded company. If Steinhoff couldn't get its accounts approved by its auditors, it would send a massive alarm signal to the entire financial world. The whispers that had started with the German investigation years earlier were now growing into loud murmurs of concern within financial circles. Something was clearly wrong, and the smooth facade that Marcus Joost had maintained for so long was beginning to crumble under the intense scrutiny. The world was about to find out that the cracks were far deeper than anyone had imagined. Then, on the evening of Tuesday, December 5th, 2017, the bombshell dropped. Steinhoff International shocked the financial world with a late-night announcement. The company stated that new information has come to light today which relates to accounting irregularities, and that its highly celebrated CEO, Marcus Joost, had resigned with immediate effect. The carefully constructed image of Steinhoff as a global success story was shattered in an instant. The company also announced it was hiring PwC, another major accounting firm, to conduct an independent forensic investigation. This meant bringing in financial detectives to dig through Steinhoff's books and uncover exactly what these accounting irregularities were, how deep they went, and who was responsible. Marcus Joost, the man who had been the face of Steinhoff for nearly 2 decades, was gone. In a private message sent to some colleagues shortly after his resignation, he reportedly admitted to making some big mistakes and stated that he had caused financial loss to many unsuspecting people. However, this was far from a full confession to the scale of what would soon be revealed. His vague words only added to the growing sense of dread and uncertainty. The reaction in the financial markets was swift and brutal. When the Johannesburg Stock Exchange opened the next morning, Steinhoff's share price didn't just fall, it plunged into a terrifying freefall. Within days, the company that had been worth billions, a darling of investors, lost over 80% of its value. Billions of dollars, euros, and rands in shareholder wealth vanished into thin air. It was a bloodbath. The scale of the investor losses was staggering. Pension funds, which managed the retirement savings of ordinary working people, saw huge holes blown in their investments. Wealthy individuals, including prominent South African businessman Christo Wiese, who had been a major shareholder and chairman of Steinhoff, lost fortunes. Wiese alone reportedly saw billions wiped from his personal wealth. Banks that had lent money to Steinhoff were suddenly facing huge potential losses. Small, everyday investors who had put their faith and their savings into what they believed was a blue-chip company were devastated. In total, the market value lost was estimated to be over 200 billion rands, which was more than 13 billion US dollars at the time. A wave of shock, disbelief, and anger swept through South Africa and international financial centers. How could a company this big, this seemingly successful, have hidden such massive problems? How could its charismatic leader, lauded for his business genius, have overseen such a disaster? Steinhoff, once a symbol of corporate ambition and success, was now on the brink of collapse, its name forever tainted by scandal. The unraveling had begun, and it was clear that a very ugly truth was about to be exposed. After the shocking resignation of Marcus Joost and the collapse of Steinhoff's share price, the heavy task of figuring out what went wrong fell to the forensic investigators from PwC. Their mission was to follow the money, untangle years of complex deals, and uncover the truth, however ugly it might be. As PwC's investigators painstakingly combed through mountains of documents, emails, and financial records over many months, A picture of a massive, deliberate deception began to emerge. The final report, or at least the summaries of it that became public, painted a damning picture. The headline figure was astounding. The investigators found that transactions worth a staggering 6.5 billion euros were fictitious or irregular. This wasn't just a small accounting error. This was a hole blown through the very heart of Steinhoff's financial statements, built up over many years, from at least 2009 to 2017. So, how did Marcus Joost and his associates manage to hide such a colossal fraud for so long? It wasn't one single trick, but a whole series of deceptive practices cleverly woven together. One of the main methods was simply making up profits. Steinhoff, on paper, looked like it was earning far more money than it actually was. This was done in several ways. Sometimes, fake income was created out of thin air. For example, the company might record a huge profit from a supposed sale that never really happened, or from a complex deal with another company that was designed only to create a paper profit, not a real one. Often, this imaginary income was booked within Steinhoff's complicated web of intermediary holding companies, and then allocated to make underperforming parts of the business look like they were doing well. They also inflated the value of what Steinhoff owned. This means they made the company's assets, like its properties, its brands, or its investments in other companies, look much more valuable in the financial reports than they truly were. This, in turn, made Steinhoff appear stronger and wealthier overall. Crucially, this wasn't something that hundreds of employees were in on. The PwC report indicated that this huge deception was orchestrated by a small, tight-knit group of former Steinhoff executives and a few people outside the company. At the center of this group, the report suggested, was Marcus Joost himself, the CEO. Other senior figures often named in connection with the irregularities included Steinhoff's former chief financial officer, Ben Lagrange, and executives like Dirk Schreiber, Stehen Grobler, and Sigmar Schmidt, who managed key parts of the European operations where many of the deceptive practices occurred. As the financial wreckage of Steinhoff smoldered, the hunt for accountability began. This wasn't just about saving the company. It was about finding out exactly who was responsible for the massive fraud and ensuring they faced justice. Because Steinhoff was a global company with operations and listings in many countries, investigations were launched by authorities in several different parts of the world, all trying to unravel the complex web of deceit. In South Africa, the authorities swung into action on multiple fronts. The Financial Sector Conduct Authority, FSCA, which acts as the market watchdog, launched its own probe, looking into issues like false and misleading financial statements and potential insider trading. Whether anyone had illegally used their knowledge of the impending disaster to sell shares before the public knew. The Hawks, South Africa's special police unit for serious and complex crimes, opened a criminal investigation into the fraud itself. Their job was to gather evidence to see if crimes like fraud and racketeering, a term for organized criminal activity, had been committed. And the National Prosecuting Authority, NPA, was the body that would ultimately have to decide whether to bring criminal charges against individuals and prosecute them in court. Meanwhile, in Germany, where Steinhoff had significant business operations and was also listed on the stock exchange, prosecutors in the city of Oldenburg were already looking into Steinhoff's accounting practices even before the December 2017 collapse. Their investigation, which had started around 2015, now intensified considerably. They, too, were focused on uncovering evidence of accounting fraud and identifying the individuals behind it. Other countries where Steinhoff had a legal presence, like the Netherlands, where Steinhoff International was officially registered, also saw their regulatory bodies take an interest. While investigations into the Steinhoff collapse slowly ground forward, Marcus Joost, the man at the center of the storm, largely remained out of the public eye, living a quieter life away from the glare of the business world he once dominated. However, the wheels of justice, though turning slowly, were indeed turning, and the consequences for his actions began to mount, piece by piece. In the early days after the scandal broke, Joost made a prominent appearance before a South African parliamentary inquiry in 2018. Facing a panel of lawmakers, he famously denied any knowledge of the widespread accounting fraud that had brought Steinhoff to its knees. He portrayed himself as someone who had also been misled, a stark contrast to the picture of him as the mastermind that was emerging from the investigations. His denials, however, did little to stem the tide of evidence and public anger. Steinhoff itself, under its new leadership, took action against its former CEO. The company launched civil lawsuits against Joost, aiming to recover vast sums of money, billions of rands, that it claimed he had unlawfully diverted or caused the company to lose through his deceptive practices. These legal battles were complex and drawn out, but they signaled that the company he once led was now actively seeking to hold him financially accountable. Then came the financial penalties from regulatory bodies. The Financial Sector Conduct Authority, an FSCA in South Africa, found Joost guilty of insider trading. They determined he had sent a warning message to a few close friends, advising them to sell their Steinhoff shares just days before the scandal became public, and the share price crashed. For this, the FSCA initially slapped him with a massive fine of over 161 million rands. Although this fine was later reduced to 20 million rands after an appeal, it was a significant public censure. Reports also suggested that this reduced fine remained unpaid for a long time. The Johannesburg Stock Exchange, JSE, also imposed its own sanctions. They fined Joost R7, 5 million, part of a joint R, 15 million fine with his former CFO, and more significantly, banned him from being a director of any company listed on the exchange for 20 years. This effectively ended any possibility of him returning to a prominent role in South Africa's corporate world. As the years passed, the legal pressure intensified. The South African Reserve Bank, SARB, which monitors currency controls, began to target Joost's assets. Believing that some of his wealth might have been improperly moved or acquired, the SARB obtained court orders to seize assets linked to him. This included his luxurious Lanzerak wine estate in Stellenbosch, valuable art collections, and other financial assets. The image of his prized possessions being confiscated sent a strong message that the authorities were serious about clawing back what they could. The news tightened further on the international front. In Germany, where prosecutors had been meticulously building a case against him for accounting fraud, Joost was formally indicted. When he failed to appear in court in Oldenburg for the start of his trial in April 2023, the German authorities issued an arrest warrant for him. This meant that if he ever set foot in Germany, or potentially other European countries with similar agreements, he could be immediately arrested. His world was shrinking. Back in South Africa, the investigations by the Hawks and the National Prosecuting Authority were also reaching a critical stage. By early 2024, it became clear that Joost's arrest was imminent. A warrant for his arrest on serious charges, including fraud and racketeering related to the Steinhoff scandal, was reportedly being finalized or had just been issued. The immense pressure that had been building around Marcus Joost reached its peak in late March 2024. Just one day before, on March 20th, the Financial Sector Conduct Authority had hit him with that colossal 475 million rands fine for his role in Steinhoff's misleading financial statements. The news of this huge penalty, coupled with the knowledge that an arrest warrant in South Africa was active and his appearance in court was imminent, painted a grim picture for the former CEO. The legal and financial walls were closing in from all sides. Then, on Thursday, March 21st, 2024, stunning news broke that brought Marcus Joost's tumultuous story to a shocking and tragic end. He was found near his coastal home in Hermanus, a town in the Western Cape. Reports confirmed that he had died from a self-inflicted gunshot wound. At the age of 63, the man who had once been a towering figure in the business world had chosen to end his own life. The timing was impossible to ignore. Just a day after the massive fine was publicized, and with the very real prospect of arrest and a lengthy, high-profile criminal trial looming, it seemed Joost had reached a point from which he saw no escape, or perhaps no other path he was willing to take.